Hey,
Hey.
welcome back, everybody.
And we're back. What's going on, folks? How's it going? Welcome to another exciting yet informative episode of the Battle Bros podcast with Mac and Alamo. I'm Mac. This is my cohort and co-host and partner in crime, Alamo. What's going on there, Stud Muffin?
It's going well, my friend. Meine Freund, as they say in Germany. Doing very well, my man.
You started to say the F sound, and I was like, no, don't call me leader. I know what that word is. That's not good. No. Okay, we're good.
Yeah.
Oh, kind of got me a little puckered up there for the wrong reasons. Like, oh shit, Dickory, damn it.
Oh, I'm sorry, pal.
What?
I said I'm sorry, pal.
You should be sorry there, bucko. So what's going on, everybody? I'm glad that we're back here. This is like my favorite part of the week, as always. So welcome back to the show. If you're listening for the first time, welcome. Hopefully you like what you hear, and you might laugh, you might cry, you might do a little bit of both. Hopefully you don't have to, go exit the room and get a little clamped or nothing like that. So, but yeah, if you are listening for the first time, what we are is a podcast of two friends that have known each other for 20 years. And we're all about empowering veterans and other, folks to, live their best life by finding their next mission after separating from the military. A lot of folks get lost, don't know what to do. So we want to try to give you a little bit of purpose, direction, motivation, whatever the case may be. So sit back, buckle up, and hold on to your butts. We got to stop talking over each other. It doesn't work that way, pal.
I know. So, this one might be a little rough for some people.
Yeah.
I know it might be a little bit rough for me. I'm not going to even pretend to have gone through anywhere near as much as some guys possibly have, nor am I going to pretend that I have, been going through as much as some other guys have, but I still had some really rough times, adjusting. So
sure,
this ought to be an interesting one.
Yeah, and the important thing to remember is that it's not a contest. Oh, I went through more, I went through less, whatever.
Yeah,
we're not trying to have that sense of contest. We're trying to have that sense of community, because if we can express and share what we've gone through, we can hopefully learn from it and make the group better, and that's what we're all about. So
absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those that aren't quite sure what we're talking about, so for the last couple episodes, episodes 6 and 7, we talked about stress and we talked about anxiety, and those are kind of not just solely pertinent to military or the veteran community, but kind of everybody. I mean, you've got stress and anxiety in your life, as to what degree is up to that individual person and whatnot. So this episode, however, is going to be the first of two parts on the subject of post-traumatic stress disorder. So this is something that has gained a lot of attention. It's gained a lot of what am I trying to say here, dude? It's gained a lot of traction with people for the sake of just being aware of it, and that's
I would say it's garnered a lot of attention.
Yes, thank you, my man.
Much because I think, especially nowadays, I mean, we're talking about 20 years that we've been kind of, acting as kind of, I'm not going to necessarily say we've been fighting a war. I mean, yeah, it is technically warfare on kind of all the most realistic levels, but we've kind of been playing Team America World Police. And in playing Team America World Police, we have been exposed to quite a bit of conflict. Much because, and the reason for that is because, not to try and call it out, but I mean, radical Islam radical Islamic terrorism, excuse me. Not to be, let's hope we don't, get, pegged for this, but it's kind of a global thing. They're, they have infiltrators everywhere, man. And because of that, our war fighters are sent all over the place. And I would say nowadays, especially, there's not too many people out there nowadays that you can go to and say they don't know somebody or have a friend or a family member or have a friend of a friend of a friend who has served and been affected by this kind of growing problem, this conflict. So there's a lot of people that have been touched by it.
Well, yeah, I mean, just the fact of calling it what it is, the global war on terrorism. This isn't just us. This stuff's going on all over the place, and that could easily, be a whole nother episode by itself, talking about the spread of terrorism and how it's not just, we're not the only ones that are strictly, dealing with this problem. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, hell, they've had attacks in France and other places, and it's like, it's a big deal. So,
yeah,
but you're absolutely right. We for being in a state of 20 years of having a higher than peacetime sense of operational tempo. Yeah, there's going to be some side effects. There's going to be some issues with that. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about today, folks. We're going to kind of go into what PTSD is. We're going to talk about some of the symptomologies of them, and then kind of some history of it, how it came to be called PTSD. And we're also going to kind of just talk about our own experiences with it. So, so what do you say we hit the ground running, my man?
Let's do it, man.
All right, cool. All right, so what we're going to talk about first is we're going to give you the definition of post-traumatic stress disorder. According to this particular source that we looked up, I believe it was an online website. It is a mental and behavioral disorder that can develop because of exposure to a traumatic event, such as sexual assault, warfare, traffic collisions, child abuse, domestic violence, and other threats on a person's life. Now, obviously, for the sake of our show, it is going to be focused more towards the aspect of warfare. There are times, and now let me just give the disclaimer. We're not trying to say the other causes of PTSD are not as important. That's not what we're saying at all.
Or
PTSD,
valid.
Thank you. That's a very good hitting point. They are valid. They are important, and everybody has gone through their own trial by fire with this.
Right.
Different causes. There's folks that have PTSD that have never seen a day of combat. Doesn't mean it's any worse or better recognized, or you need to have your banner held higher. We're not about that. We're talking about PTSD. Primarily, we're going to focus on the warfare aspect of it, because this is a podcast about military culture and military subculture and all that kind of stuff. But, if you are one of those folks out there that kind of falls into this category, this is for you too, because we're going to talk about it in a general sense and kind of give you some information about it if you didn't know it. So as I said, it is primarily, it comes from something serious happening, a traumatic event, as I said on this thing: sexual assault, warfare, traffic collisions, child abuse, domestic violence, other threats on a person's life. So it's basically a reaction to something that has happened to where you're just like, whoa, and it just kind of gives you a little bit of, pause to kind of just be like, okay, time to engage that survival instinct, fight or flight kicks over, so on and so forth. So, since we have the definition, we're going to kind of go back in time. Come with me, boys and girls. We're going to go back in time a little bit. We're going to talk about where it all came from. So,
we're going to be going back in time, in fact, to one of the first great global wars, aka the Great War, also known as
WW1. And not just saying W, because I like the way people say W, D-U-B-Y-A, W. But so one of the first experiences, or not experiences, but one of the first times that they started recognizing PTSD was actually called something different. It was called shell shock. Shell shock is a term coined from British psychologist Charles Samuel Myers to describe the type of PTSD that many soldiers were afflicted with before it was actually called PTSD. Some of the other names that it was referred to are called bullet wind, soldier's heart, battle fatigue, operational exhaustion, and then there's also what is, no, I said it already, battle fatigue. I'm sorry, I was thinking something else. My fault. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of read off some stuff here from an article, some of the stuff that we looked up. So shell shock can be interpreted as either a physical or psychological injury or simply as a lack of moral fiber. Now, this will kind of come into play later on as we read through this article that we researched. But in World War II and thereafter, a diagnosis of shell shock was replaced by that of combat stress reaction, a similar but not identical response to the trauma of warfare and bombardment. Okay.
Yeah. During World War II, I believe they started becoming a little bit more sympathetic to the effects of it because they realized that at a certain point, the mental fatigue that wore down on the men over sustained combat over a long time had some serious side effects. So they had to, they started to kind of crack down on, well, crap, something's going on with this guy. We need to figure out what it is. It's obviously something mental. We need to give him either a break or give him some time off the battlefield, that kind of jazz.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you're going to see later on, like how having this, diagnosis could have been kind of problematic to your military career and possibly to your life. So we'll get into that a little bit later. I don't want to give away too much, but so during the early stages of World War I in 1914, soldiers from the British Expeditionary Force began to report medical symptoms after combat, including tinnitus, amnesia, headaches, dizziness, tremors, and hypersensitivity to noise. So you're already starting to see some of those familiar manifestations of PTSD even back then. Yeah. While these symptoms resembled those that would be expected after a physical wound to the brain, many of those reporting sick showed no signs of head wounds. By December 1914, as many as 10% of British officers and 4% of enlisted men were suffering from what they called nervous and mental shock. Reading on. The number of shell shock cases grew during 1915 and 1916, but it remained poorly understood medically and psychologically. Some physicians held the view that it is the result of a hidden physical damage to the brain, with the shock waves from bursting shells created a cerebral lesion that caused the symptoms and could potentially prove fatal, hence the term shell shock. Yeah. Another explanation was that the shell resulted...
Strange thing on that, by the way.
What's up?
There actually has been some linkage to the concussive waves of explosions and relating to, I guess you could say, mental and physical injury to our service members or going overseas that have it, even if they're not even like in very, very close proximity of the blasts. Many of them have been shown to have issues later on. Anything from low testosterone to, just kind of mental shock and things like that. It's pretty crazy.
And that's a whole other point that's a whole other point that I heard brought up one time by somebody else. Another guy who has like a social media, podcast type of thing like we got going on, but he was talking about, he served in the special ops community in the Marine Corps. So he was force reconnaissance. And then he went to the critical skills operator, like their version of, the Marine Corps version of SF or whatnot, their counterpart to that. Yeah. MARSOC. And he was talking about how he came out and he had the testosterone levels of like a 65-year-old man. And this guy was only in his 30s. So that might be something cool we could check out down the road too.
Yeah.
Reading on, another explanation was that the shell shock resulted from poisoning by the carbon monoxide formed by explosions. At the same time, an alternative view developed describing shell shock as an emotional rather than a physical injury. Evidence for this point of view was provided by the fact that an increasing proportion of men suffering shell shock symptoms had not been exposed to artillery fire. Since the symptoms appeared in men who had no proximity to an exploding shell, the physical explanation was clearly unsatisfactory. In spite of this evidence, the British Army continued to try to differentiate those whose symptoms followed explosive exposures from others. Now, this is where it gets kind of interesting, so pay attention to this. In 1915, the British Army in France was instructed that shell shock and shell concussion cases should have the letter W prefixed to the report of the casualty if excuse me, if it was due to the enemy, in the case that the patient would be entitled to rank as wounded and wear on his arm a wound stripe. So that was part of the uniforms back during that particular time, was you actually had a wound stripe, and that was kind of, I think, also in the it's kind of also in the lineage of how like the Purple Heart came to be. But now this, mind you, this was also the British Army, not the American military. So a little bit different. If, however, the man's breakdown did not follow a shell explosion, it was not thought to be, quote, due to the enemy, unquote, and he was to be labeled shell shock or S for sickness, and was not entitled to wear a wound stripe or to receive a pension. However, it proved
which basically meant he just got rolled back into the fight at a certain point.
Sorry. Here's your gun. Go back up to the front. Go sit in the muck and don't get trench foot. However, it often proved difficult to identify which cases were which, as the information on whether a casualty had been close to a shell explosion or not was rarely provided. Okay. Now, the last part of that. So this is going to kind of roll into some other stuff that we're going to talk about here from another article. 2015 research by Johns Hopkins University has found that the brain tissue of combat veterans who have been exposed to improvised explosive devices, or IEDs, exhibit a pattern of injury in the areas responsible for decision-making, memory, and reasoning. This evidence has led the researchers to conclude that shell shock may not only be a psychological disorder, since the symptoms exhibited by sufferers from the First World War are very similar to these injuries. Immense pressure changes are involved in shell shock. Even mild changes in air pressure from the weather have been linked to changes in behavior. So, from this particular article, you can kind of see already what's going on and kind of, how that all relates to all this. Okay.
Yeah.
So, 1914, 1915, they're already seeing like all this kind of stuff. Oh, that's the other term I was looking for. Or is it in my notes? Combat neurosis.
Yeah. Oh, combat neurosis. Yeah. The bloody shame about it, though, man, is that freaking. All this we were talking about is all of this. By the way, guys, this is stuff that was recognized before the end of the war. It was like later on in a later date when a lot of this started getting recognized. But earlier on in the war, we're talking about like 1914, 15, like sometimes even going into like 1917 and beyond. A lot of these guys, these poor saps, a lot of these guys were either getting arrested, shot. For abandonment on the battlefield, just for cowardice, and it's a damn shame. A lot of these, the condition wasn't, because it was so misunderstood. Even to this day, it is still, which we'll get into. But even it was so misunderstood that no one wanted to recognize that there was a mental toll for, I don't know, seeing your buddies getting blown up and running through a field of dead bodies and getting your limb blown off and mustard gas. And if you read some of this stuff from World War I and the deaths that occurred from mustard gas, I couldn't even imagine. It's fucking terrifying. Yeah. I sat there reading it one time, just like, I'll go into a short little snippet and then we'll get back to it. But during a certain part of the war, I believe it was in the Arns, no, not the Arns, Verdun. There was a certain point. There was a certain point in Verdun where the French were facing off against the Germans, and the Germans ended up using mustard gas against them. Well, from what I was reading was from the Germans' perspective, and they fired these mustard gas grenades and these kind of like miniature missiles into the French line. Now, when the Germans fired this off, all they could hear were men screaming in for their lives. When they went to the other side of the line, like I don't want to go into too much detail because there was a lot more in there, but I'm just kind of giving a brief. What they found was horrendous. I mean, you're talking about guys clawing at their face, and like you could see, like they said that they found guys with chunks of their own skin still embedded in their nails and scratched away at their face just from the mustard gas, just because they could not breathe. It was so just terrible, and to even from the enemy perspective, from them to walk up on just just things like that. Do you really expect people to not be affected up here in some way, even from the enemy standpoint? I mean, these guys, I mean, we're not talking about the Nazis back then. The Nazis were a whole nother freaking monster, but these guys, I mean, they were they were fighting for their country, just like, just like any other, nation's army at the time. Just imagine what these guys thought. It had to be terrible.
So you kind of made me think about something there, Alamo. Did you ever sit around with like, your battle buddies, like your squad mates, your platoon mates, and you ever talk about like, because for the folks at home, being a combat arms troop, you have to understand there's a good possibility that, you're going to go out there and meet your demise. So that just kind of becomes part of your mental rhetoric of just being like, hey, we might go on a patrol and you might step on an IED or you might get taken out by a sniper. You just kind of have to face that reality. And it's not being morbid. It's just you're kind of, in a way, you're making your own peace with it.
Right.
So I remember a conversation sitting around talking to some guys. I don't remember exactly who, but we were just like, hey, man, if you had to pick how you had to go, how would you go? And we all kind of thought, kind of went around the group and had some different answers. And one guy said, it's like, I just want to get shot. Like, if I'm going to go, let me get shot and let me be over with so I don't have to suffer, because one, I don't want to have somebody come try to get injured, trying to pick me up and pull me out of the fray. But right. Two, just let it be over with. And it's like, especially when you talk about just those guys seeing the other guys just gouging chunks of flesh out of their own face. And it's just how awful it is. Like,
yeah.
How do you see that and not end up being, mentally just fucked up? Like, I just heard about that, and I just kind of pictured, like, that picture of World War II trench warfare, and it's just like,
dude,
guys, it was awful.
I have too good of an imagination, man, and just reading what I read,
right?
I was like, oh my god, it's freaking terrible, man. Absolutely.
And it also just goes to show you how, especially for folks that like, myself and Alamo here, we're GWAT veterans. We're veterans of the global war on terrorism. And you just go and you look back at the guys from the previous conflict. Like for us, it was Vietnam. And for those guys before them, it was Korea. And you look at those guys like, you guys got balls of solid rock. You're some tough sons of bitches, man. You guys went through all that shit. You didn't have the technology. You didn't have the equipment. I mean, hell, the guys that jumped into World War II, a lot of those guys that jumped in on D-Day and in Normandy, the planes were going twice as fast as they were supposed to because they were trying to avoid all the anti-aircraft fire and all the flak turning these planes into Swiss cheese. And they're going twice as fast as they're supposed to. So when those guys jump out of the plane, out of the C-47s, they're getting hit with so much prop blast that it's literally just shearing all of the equipment off their bodies. These guys are landing with a compass, a trench knife, a set of brass knuckles for all those guys that are from New York. Just kidding, buddy.
Well, I don't doubt it, though.
Hey, man, you guys, they ended up just having nothing. because of the situation just got out of control very quickly.
They
But it
had to
also shows
salvage
you
enemy weapons.
they had to get, other guys that did make it when they landed, they were just like, hey, he's gone. I'm not trying to be rude, but he's not going to need it. I'm going to need it. I'm still in the fight. So start stripping stuff off of that they can use, whether it's C rations, whether it's grenades, whether it's, plastique, whether it's a weapon, whatever the case may be. So I've always
Plastique, by the way, guys, is not, it's, well, I'll let Macalicious say it because he can probably explain it better than I could.
No, you go for it, man. You got it.
I believe it was like one of the first versions of a moldable explosive, wasn't it? Plastique.
I think it was called. Yeah, I think that's where the term C4 comes from. Is compound 4. It's something very similar to that, to where you can shape the charge to get a desired effect.
It was before C4 came out. Yeah, it was before C4.
That's right. Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, these guys are landing with nothing, and you're just like, you have to just literally the whole thing. You know what you have to do because they've been drilled into their heads down cold, where they got to know what they're doing and whatnot.
Yeah.
But then you got to just figure out, what you have to go, but you don't have to figure out how to get there and just kind of bridge this gap to get to the objective and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, we digress a little bit on that.
We did.
But it's all good. It's kind of important to the conversation. So, some more interesting history about PTSD. So, PTSD was not officially recognized until 1980 by the American Psychiatric Association, when it was included in the 3rd edition of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. Now, if anybody works in like behavioral health or something like that, psychology, the DSM is very, very, very important because it actually goes through and it's like in a catalog of anything from this behavioral sense, whether it's PTSD, whether it's anxiety, whether it's anything from a clinical sense. So back in 1980 they realized, hey, and so what happened right before 1980? You had the 1970s, you had the 1960s, Vietnam. So you had a lot of these guys that were just coming over, and again, anybody that's gone through a war before us, props to you guys, because Jesus, you had it so much harder. You didn't have the equipment we have nowadays. It's always part of your training. You're like, yeah, I'm awesome. I'm the shit. I'm a young stud motherfucker. I'm gonna go over and I'm gonna take care of business. But then you think about guys before that, and it's just like, wow, I couldn't even fathom that. Being in the jungle rot, just being on the Ho Chi Minh Trail, all that kind of jazz. So anyway, that's kind of a big deal because they're starting to include that in that publication. They put that out every so often. I think they're currently on the 5th edition of the DSM. I think it's DSM 5. So,
gotcha.
But it's kind of important. So, what are some symptoms of PTSD? If you know, because you may have experienced it firsthand. You may have gone through it with a family member, a friend, a relative, something along those lines. But for those that don't know, we're going to kind of break it down for you. So symptoms may include disturbing thoughts, feelings, or dreams related to the events, depending on what those particular that cause that event was that caused the manifestation of this. Mental or physical distress to trauma-related cues, like I just said. Attempts to avoid trauma-related cues, alterations in the way a person thinks and feels, and an increase in the fight or flight response. We're going to talk about that more in a little bit. These symptoms last for more than a month after the event. Young children are less likely to show distress, but instead may express their memories through play. A person with PTSD is at a higher risk of suicide and intentional self-harm. That's also important. Once you've been exposed to that, like I said, it alters your thinking, and it can cause it can lead to some dark thoughts, dark paths in your upstairs. So you just got to be careful of that. Now, before we get to the other article that I printed off, I wanted to give some perspective. So first off, we want to say thank you to Dr. Gino. Is a very good friend of mine for many years now. He has his PhD in neuroanthropology. So I asked him to kind of give me some input on what he thought about that from the perspective of his field. So from the perspective of neuroanthropology, you have to understand that, PTSD, as he put it, really, he disagrees with it being called a disorder. And it's, because disorder makes it sound like there's something wrong, whereas it should be more classified as like an adaptation, because what you're doing is you're having to react to something that came about and just kind of, shook your whole life up, whether it was a car crash or whether it was serving overseas and whatnot. One of the other notes he had is that, coming back home to, after going through, and just like we talked, like Alma talked about with that example from World War I, or, Vietnam, or nowadays, like even what's going on, current event wise right now. I'm not going to get too far into that and get into the weeds, but anything like that, in order to experience something like that, and then to just come home and expect to pick back up where everything left off is rather asinine, because it's really not realistic. There's just no way. I mean, it's like seeing something just that changes the whole fiber of your being and your life, and you're just going to be like, I'll just put that in a nice little box and put it up in the closet with all the other stuff that I don't need anymore, like my yearbooks from high school. It's just going to sit up there and whatever. So one of the other things he said that was I thought was very good, for the folks that have served in the military, part of, and it, like they kind of went through this a few years ago when we were in, like they talked about like the soldiers, like the warriors ethos or whatnot, like they have part of like there's the what do they call it, the Ranger thing, the Ranger Creed? Yeah, the Ranger Creed, right?
Yes.
So for anybody that's assigned to the Ranger Regiment, you have like this 6 paragraph thing that they get up and they recite every day. And it's like, to hear the thing read out loud and recited, like first thing in the morning, these guys are all out there in their PTs, sweaty and all stuff.
Badass.
It's the motivating shit, folks. Like if you haven't seen it, just read through what that is. And it's like, fuck, where's my recruiter? Sign me up right now. I'm ready to go. So it's pretty badass. But, part of that is you have that warrior ethos. You just talk about, like we've talked about in the past on the show, basically just what you will and what you won't do. And, in those kind of events, you just, you're not going to act the same. You're going to act at home. You're going to go and, it's all about making it home alive and performing and completing the mission and hitting the objective, all that kind of stuff. But, one of the things that happens is like, people come home and other folks that may not understand what they're going through, just expect them to just be like, put that in the box. So, no, it doesn't work like that. What you have to understand is that shit is always going to be a part of you, even though you're not serving the military anymore, even though you're not currently a service member, you're a veteran. How do you, like, there's a great picture of, there's a parade going down a road in Main Street, America, and everybody's sitting down and a color guard comes by and this elderly gentleman just gets up and he's standing there with his walker and he renders a hand salute to the colors when it's walking by. And it's like, that's something that stays with you forever. It's like that doesn't ever leave. So you just got to, you got to, it's like, I find that funny because people are just like, oh, you can just put that away. No, you really can't. I mean, once that becomes a core, like a structural component of your core beliefs and your personality, like that's just with you forever. Like don't let anybody ever change that. So, but one of the other points he made was talking about, the difference between, and this is where a lot of people have some differentiating opinions and whatnot, but, you have a lot of folks that might be trying to offer relief or whatnot. And you have some guy who's might be a doctor, might be a researcher, whatever, the white coat, so to speak. And that's not, meant to be a derogatory term, just kind of a generalization. How are you going to go and listen to this guy? Yeah, he might be clinical and all this stuff. He might know what he's talking about, but at the same time, he wasn't there. He doesn't know. Did you ever get up at, 5 o'clock in the morning to go friggin' walk for 20 miles to have where your feet are going to fall off? Like feel like your feet are going to fall off. And next thing you know, doing all this crazy stuff. You got to do buddy carries, all this stuff. Like, it's just hard to say that.
Yeah.
It's hard for them to maybe understand that. Whereas, like we've talked about plenty of times on this show since its inception, it's like, if you got something you got to talk about, man, shout it out. Go find somebody, let it out, man. Find somebody you can talk to, discuss it, to the best of your ability, work through that shit together with somebody that's there. Like, if I'm going to call somebody, it's going to be somebody I might have served with, like, even I didn't serve with Alamo, but at the same time, he's been through some stuff that is similar but different that I've gone through. So he's got an inkling of it. He's got an understanding of it. So yeah, absolutely. He's going to have a better idea than, and I don't mean to say this in a bad way, but like one of my biological blood brothers, I have an older brother and younger brother. Like, they're both great dudes. They're, they got my back. I've got their back. But at the same time, it's going to be hard to kind of, impress upon them the full extent of what went on over there, what you're feeling, just the whole fallout of it, what you got to do to keep yourself on an even keel, all that stuff. I mean, they'll be supportive. Don't get me wrong. Family members are supposed to be there to be supportive, and I would say in most situations, but
I say it like this. Sometimes it's better to be able to speak to someone that you can relate to on the situation, someone that can understand because they've been in maybe not the same exact situation. However, they've been in a similar situation.
Yep.
Kind of that individual that, you get it. Cool.
And would you venture to say, Alamo, that that's kind of the reason why, especially in this day and age, when we look at stuff like social media or we look at stuff related to business, you kind of want to, you're more apt as a veteran to follow along and maybe kind of support these businesses that are run by guys that have been in wartime, kind of like guys that have freaking, guys that have deployed, guys that have been downrange. Like, look at all the stuff that there is nowadays that are from veteran entrepreneurs or vetpreneurs. You've got Vet TV, you've got Combat Veteran. They just opened up a new TV
Withers
service.
just made a valid statement. He said it's not the same, Mac. Blood family does not understand the environment. It's not that they don't get it, but they've never been in the environment. So that
exactly
makes sense. Yeah.
Shout out to Withers. Welcome back. Appreciate you viewing the show again. Yeah, very valid point. I have two brothers biologically that are blood. I also have brothers that I have, sweat with, that I've cried with, that I've, just bled with and all that kind of stuff. Not necessarily in that same context as other stuff, but, I have a lot of brothers that aren't family that I would consider part of my family because of what we've been through. So
damn right.
So anyway, Dr. G, thank you for your input on that. Appreciate that. We're going to give him a shout out at the end of the show. But yeah, some valid points there. So absolutely. So one of the other articles that we researched, and this is thanks to my pal Brian. Brian is going for his master's in psychology. He's almost done. He's a little bit more to do. So he gave me an article, and it was from
one more essay.
SOCOM. It was from SOCOM, and it was talking about how PTSD affects the brain circuitry. Now, I am by no stretch of the imagination an expert on how the brain works because, let's face it, when I was younger, I was a little bit of a dumbass. But these folks know what they're talking about, so I'm just going to go off this article because it has some really valid points. So if y'all will bear with me for just a few more minutes, I'm going to read the majority of this, and it's going to kind of make some sense here and kind of put it all into perspective. So over the past 40 years, scientific methods of neuroimaging have enabled scientists to see that PTSD causes distinct biological changes in the brain, as we talked about in that first article. Not everybody with PTSD has exactly the same symptoms or the same brain changes, but there are observable patterns that can be understood and treated. It has a diagram on here, which unfortunately I couldn't bring up because, yeah. The amygdala of the brain triggers your natural alarm system. When you experience a disturbing event, like the ones we listed earlier, it sends a signal that causes a fear response. An extreme fear response makes sense when your alarm bells buzz at the right time and for the right reasons to keep you safe. Those with PTSD tend to have an overreactive response. So something as harmless as a car backfiring could instantly trigger panic. And that's, a pretty common description that people had of Vietnam
Guilty of
vets.
that one.
Yeah. The amygdala is a primitive animalistic part of the brain wired to ensure survival. When it's overreactive, it's hard to think rationally. Your brain's prefrontal cortex, the frontmost part of the neocortex, helps you think through decisions, observe how you're thinking, and put on the brakes when you realize something you first feared is actually not a threat at all. The prefrontal cortex helps to regulate emotional responses triggered by the amygdala. In operators and enablers with PTSD, the prefrontal cortex doesn't always manage to do its job when it's needed. An overactive amygdala combined with an underactive prefrontal cortex creates a perfect storm. It's like stomping on the accelerator of your car, even when you don't need to, only to discover the brakes don't work. This might help you understand why someone with PTSD might feel anxious around anything even slightly related to the original trauma that led to the PTSD, or have strong physical reactions to situations that shouldn't provoke a fear reaction, and avoid situations that might trigger those intense emotions and reactions. Other common PTSD experiences, such as unwanted feelings that pop up out of nowhere, or always being on the lookout for threats that could lead to more trauma, seem to be related to the hippocampus, or memory center of the brain. When the hippocampus doesn't work right, you can't recall important memories when you need them, or fearful ones turn up at the wrong times, confusing your sense of right now. You can't match up the fact that you're safe or not with the right memories. Treatment techniques for PTSD include cognitive restructuring, stress inoculation training, and exposure therapy. With cognitive restructuring, we learn new ways to think about things, reframing your thoughts, which is kind of what we talked about previously about grounding yourself. Another term that actually Dr. Gino brought up was reframing. So thanks again for all that stuff. Reframing your thoughts to match current conditions. I'm getting a little stupid in the mouth now. It also helps you become aware of cognitive errors in your thinking and learn strategies to correct them. It helps you experience different feelings and different reactions. For instance, you might replace, I can't handle this anxiety with, I don't like these feelings, but I can handle them and they'll pass. Stress inoculation teaches you to anticipate stressful events and know that you can handle them with minimal discomfort. You learn to habitually pair things that trigger fear with relaxation techniques and coping techniques, which enable you to manage your anxiety when stress comes along. Exposure therapy exposes you to alarming stimuli in a safe way, pushing your mind and body into recognizing when you're safe. It's like watching a scary movie repeatedly until it doesn't scare you anymore. It helps your alarm system avoid misfiring. It also helps you access relevant memories so you know if you're safe. And it helps you access your mental brakes so that when your alarm does ring, you can apply the brakes if you need to. Your amygdala, prefrontal cortex, and hippocampus all contribute to the emotions and actions associated with fear, clear thinking, decision-making, and memory. Understanding these parts of your brain and how they work also might help you understand why some therapies can help work with PTSD. So, some really good interesting stuff in that article. That was sourced from the SOCOM website from a few years ago. So, Brian, thank you again for hooking us up with that. Appreciate that. That's a very valid points there. So, speaking of all that, that's kind of a good leeway into, our own experiences with PTSD. So I'm going to start that real quick. When we worked together at the gun retailer we used to work at.
Yep.
There was a gentleman that worked there, and he was a Marine Corps veteran. Had some injuries happen to him while he was over in country and whatnot. He he would probably say very lucky to be here. So they went out on a mission outside the wire to find somebody that was taking out dudes left and right from their their forward operating base. And he reached up to adjust his nods because he had the old PVS 14s, the monocular one.
Yeah. I remember those. I got issued that one.
Mm-hmm. And when he went up to adjust that, the guy that they were trying to find took a shot with a Soviet era weapon and actually hit him in the nods. So because of that concussion of the round hitting the helmet and whatnot, he's sitting there kind of stunned. He looks down and he sees a bunch of blood and whatnot because the fragment ended up taking off one of his fingers. He only had 4 fingers on one hand and whatnot. So he's sitting there thinking he's done because he sees all that blood, not knowing that's coming from his hand. So he's got had some injuries there. Fast forward to several, down the road when he's working with us, something happened at the store to where he had sort of like a flashback episode where he thought it was like the early 2000s, late 1990s. Like he just immediately forgot like 10 years worth of time because of something that happened, and it just triggered that whole kind of thing. So I've kind of not firsthand, but I've kind of seen how that affects other people, and it's completely serious. Like that's a big deal.
Yeah.
In regards to myself, I wouldn't say necessarily that I've had a big struggle with PTSD, but more like when I first came home, I would say that I had some big time issues like reintegrating back into the civilian population. I remember going to a high school, remember going to a football game at our old high school, and like just everybody being in my space and like in my immediate bubble of my reactionary space and whatnot. I'm sitting there and I was just like just so freaked out, and the person I was with, I'm literally holding her hand and she's like, "Hey, you're gonna be fine. Let's just I'm very grateful that I was not by myself at that, walking down through that crowd just to go down to the concession stand, because that would have ended up bad. But it eventually got better, and just kind of realized that, like that reframing, like, hey, I'm really not overseas. I'm here. I'm at a football game. Things are pretty good. I think I'm going to be okay. So that's kind of like my personal experience with it. What about yourself, Alamo?
For me, when I got home, I would say that I was very jumpy. When I first came home, it was difficult for me readjusting. I'm not going to necessarily say I struggled with realizing I was home. Thank God I didn't have anything as severe as forgetting literally what year it was. Man, that would suck. But I always I was on edge for a lot of interactions and going out and things like that. Like I always felt like somebody was watching me. I always felt like I had to be on guard, like really on guard around other people, just because I didn't, especially people, when it comes to people I didn't know, I didn't have at the time the capacity to really, like, I was still very approachable. I tried to be as approachable as possible, but I still maintained at least a 2-arm distance length.
Yeah. What do they call that in driver's ed? That reactionary gap when you're driving between you and the other vehicle in front of you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's kind of the same thing.
Also, it manifested also, I would say, in some nightmares. all of which have dissipated since then. Funny thing was, is a lot of it was just me being blown up, and I never got hit, but it was because we dealt with being blown up, and we dealt with explosives so often. Especially my platoon. My platoon was very, like I said, I've mentioned it before. We were really, really good at finding IEDs, and it was. I don't even know how to explain it, bro. But I had my nightmares about being blown up. I also mentioned the Sinsel 7, and that day really stuck with me. I mean, stuck with me to the point where, because remember, I told you I was on the vehicle, right? But during the extraction of the guys from the vehicle, or from the building, because there were, I believe, I don't exactly remember the number. I know Doc Riddle survived. He was unconscious, face bloated like to all hell from having gotten blown up. God damn, my hands are already starting to sweat already. But there was a hot mic while our guys were helping the guys that were surviving, that did survive, out of the building. And all I can remember is hearing our guys struggling to get those guys out of the building, but also the screams.
So let me interrupt real quick. So for the folks at home that don't know, when we say hot mic, basically with all of the communications gear that you might wear for our interpersonal communication or from vehicle to vehicle, somebody basically has the radio mic keyed to where they can just hear what's going on.
Right.
In the military terms, we say there's a hot mic. So that just means that somebody's transmitting and they're not necessarily aware of it. So
yeah, they didn't realize it.
But anyway.
But I would say that, oh my God, my heart's racing. But
It's kind of funny how we talked about anxiety.
Yeah. But I there were quite a few nights when I came back home where I woke up to their screams in my head.
Yeah.
And it was hard, man. Because I was one of those. I wanted to be on the ground helping. And I guess I was a little bit too. I guess I was a little bit, just from being young and stupid. I was too. Hey, Johnny, welcome to the chat, bro. But yeah, I wasn't allowed on the ground to go help out. So, I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah.
But I never forgot that, and for some time it played on me. And
Sure.
Dude, just talking about it, my heart was racing. My hands are all fucking sweaty right now. Like my hands got all glossy. It's no joke, man, dealing with that kind of stuff. It's really not.
And to kind of bring it back full circle, that's why we want to talk about this. There's not always going to be, it's not always going to be rainbows and, unicorns on this channel. We're going to talk about some serious stuff, and it's going to be stuff that is going to be hard to talk about. But by talking about it, we break that stigma, and we're hopefully going to encourage other people to talk about it. And just, if you can talk about it and just kind of lift that weight off your chest, give you just a little bit of reprieve. It's, that's what we want to try to do. Just get everybody to understand that it's okay that you can talk about this shit. It's never a good thing to just take it all up and bottle it up and store it downside, because it just never ends well. So yeah, I don't know what else to say to follow that up, but
Yeah.
something else you were talking about, night tremor or the having the nightmares and stuff and waking up to that. One of the things that I had something that you made me remember is, once I got back home was just being woken up was not always a good situation. It got to the point, no matter because I still lived at home at the time with my mom, and she'd go in to wake me up or something, and she'd kind of tap me on the shoulder, and I would just immediately just snap to, and she would just jump out of her skin. She's like, "I'm so sorry." I'm like, "No, it's not your fault. It's okay. Just it's kind of one of those situations." So it got to the point where I had my dad had this old school carbon fiber pointers. If you're doing a presentation before laser pointers, you'd actually go up and you have like a yardstick, but it's all nice and stuff. And yeah, no way. Try punching your mother. Yeah, no thanks, Withers. I'm good. She kicked my ass. But I had this pointer, and I just left it by the door. I said, "Listen, if you need to wake me up, you can poke me with this, just so that way, if I do have some type of, hey, what's going on kind of reaction, it's not going to end badly. I'm going to feel bad about it." So, and that was for, I would say maybe 6 months or so, 6 months to a year that I went through that. And then it just kind of finally went away and stuff. So I'm very fortunate that I didn't have anything happen that was that, so manifests itself in a much more severe way. There's folks out there, it's just you feel bad for them, and you just want to walk up to these guys and give them a hug. But there's other things that have happened where they're probably like, yeah, no. So whether it's paranoia, the distrust of everybody, it's you get it. I mean, it's crazy. So I don't have anything else to add to the show. Do you, man?
Yeah. No, man. Just PTSD again. We bring up the issue of PTSD because it's a serious issue. Again, it's felt by different veterans in very different ways. Obviously, mine. I feel it in a different way than a lot of other guys do. Like I said, just talking about that day, I was feeling exactly what I felt that day. And just feeling it, just I'm kind of getting a little bit anxious and a little bit mad and a little bit just kind of everything all at the same time right now, because I'm like, fucking shit. I was
all these emotions are just washing over your body.
Yeah, I was feeling it all over again, man. And I'm trying real hard not to break down, because it's difficult when you think about it. But I'm holding it together. Withers, thanks, man. Yeah, yeah, but that's what we're here for, man. We're here to talk about the difficult crap. We want our listeners to know, hey, man, you're not alone. That we're here to talk to each other about it, because back in World War II, you think about it this way. Back in World War II, when the guys were coming back home, they had 4 months of just nothing but talking to each other about stuff on the boats. And again, I've mentioned, because they were on boats, they spent as long as they did with each other, or not 4 months, 4 weeks. So basically about a month on the boats, just getting back home. And they had nothing but time to talk about it with each other,
And let me interject real quick. The great thing about all that?
Yeah.
There wasn't any fucking social media to jack that all up. They could just sit there and talk about each other, talk about it with each other, and just and get their head right, man. And share that bond that they had. Social media is great because it allows us to do stuff like this, but there is definitely a dark, evil side of that stuff, as I'm sure everybody has seen in the past, year or so. But please continue, Alamo. I didn't want to cut you off there.
No, you're good. You're good. But
Yeah,
like I
I know,
said, man, we 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 all feel it the same way, man. And kind of like this platform that we're using right now to kind of reach out to everybody is our way of trying to get everybody to, hey, jump in the boat with us, man. Let's talk about this crap. We may not be sensitive about it when we talk about it in the way that, most people be like, oh, it's okay, but
we don't sugarcoat shit on this show. Let me
yeah,
tell you
man,
that right now.
that's how veterans roll, man. We joke about it each other, we poke fun at each other, we say what we need to each other to cheer ourselves up. It's
Just
kind of
like
that.
just like we just did when he's like, "Oh, you're good, man." I'm like, yeah, I know. Sarcasm is a very important facet of the veteran sense of humor. Just so you folks know. So
Yeah.
so real quick before we wrap this up, I was talking to a
Yeah.
friend of mine a while back, and he was telling me, because he's originally from New York as well, and he was talking about a family member and how she's lived up there for the past 20 years. So, and we're coming up on the 20th anniversary of 9/11. So that's kind of a big deal.
Mhm.
But he was telling me, this particular relative of his doesn't go down below a certain street or avenue or something ever since that day. Like they've only been in Upper Manhattan, or I don't know the exact terminology and whatnot. So,
Was she there for the event when it happened? Or was she close by?
She was living in New York when it happened. She was in the city when that all went down. I don't know that she was anywhere near the towers, but she just was in the city, in the vicinity when that happened.
Gotcha.
And she's telling my buddy, she's like, I just have no need to go down past a certain point because it's just bad. And, it's funny, even he talked about it too. He's like, when I grew up in New York and all that stuff, he goes, I've been in Florida now for a while. It's like, I'll go back to New York and visit, but like, I'm not a New Yorker anymore. It ain't the same New York. And that's, a loaded statement on a lot of different levels that we're not going to get into right now. But he's like, that first day, second day, I'm all right. Third day, I'm like, yo, man, I want to go home. So,
yeah,
but he's kind of laughing about that. But, like you said, that's, this person was in the military. She went through a traumatic event, and that the whole country, the whole world went through a traumatic event, 9/11. Yeah. And her response is she just doesn't want to go to that point because she's like, I'm just so afraid of what I might feel or whatnot. So, we get it. That's why we want to talk about it. So,
damn skippy.
But, all right, so let's start wrapping this thing up, man. So,
jump in the boat with us, y'all. Let's have this conversation.
For everybody that is in the chat, your buddy Johnny and my pal Withers, thank you for being part of the show. We appreciate it, participating and, adding your commentary. We are absolutely thrilled that we have folks that are listening to the show and all that kind of shit. So to all you guys, appreciate it. Thank you. One of the things that we are always going to talk about is the Bros Code. So I am not going to put it up on my screen today. We're just going to kind of power through this, but we came up with like our mantra where, yes, we're going to talk about some heavy shit. We're going to talk about some stuff that might make you upset, get your palms sweaty, and get you a little bit flustered. But we're going to push past that. We're going to talk about it. We're going to, grow as a community. We're going to push past that. So one of the things that we came up with was the Bros Code. So it's easy to remember, BROS. Those are your 4 tenets of the Bros Code. So the first one, be tenacious. Be tenacious and be freaking crazy in everything you do. Don't just settle for half-assed. You go whole-assed. Wait a minute. That sounded so much better in my head. My bad. Like we were saying, though, that's what happens, folks. Sometimes you go live on YouTube. Anyway, be tenacious. Do not do anything less than 100% when you do something. Give every bit of effort, and if you can't, go past that. Okay.
Damn straight.
For R, refuse to surrender. There's going to be a lot of things that happen. There's going to be a lot of things that are going to get you on the side road off the objective or off your goal. Don't let anything get you twisted. Stay on target, stay on objective, get to where you got to go, refuse to surrender. Okay. Going along with that, obliterate your obstacles. There's going to be things that are going to knock you down, put your dick in the dirt, so what? Get up, brush yourself off, and keep driving on. That's
Smash
all
through
you
that
can
shit,
do.
baby.
If you got to knock it over, if you got to push it down, if you got to breach it with some plastique or some compound four, whatever you got to do. If you need to call in a bunch of freaking rangers and be like, hey, see that building? Don't exist anymore. Yeah, that's what you got to do. So S, the big thing that we want to remember is, you need to seek out help, as we talked about, whether it's just talking to seek out a friend in need. When you need to seek out somebody to talk to, that's important. It's even if it's listening to this show, even if it's, sitting down, talking to somebody over a beer, just having a conversation, that's what's important. You got to make sure that you're staying mentally healthy. One of the things that's come about nowadays is, the whole concept of keeping yourself healthy, taking mental health days or whatnot. And those could be a very valuable tool. If you have to take a day, just kind of be like, I need to get my head locked in, take it by all means. You got to keep yourself healthy so you can keep your friends and your family and your ring of contacts healthy. So that's very important. If you don't have a friend that you can seek out in a time of need, there's options, there's resources to you. So one of the things that we promote every show, Alan, if you want to throw that banner up, that'd be great. There you go. We have the National Suicide Prevention Hotline at 1-800-273 8255. Again, that's 1-800-273-8255. They're open 24 hours a day. If you need somebody to talk to, it's a lifeline. You can reach out to them and they will keep you on the straight and narrow and give you some ideas of what you can do to, keep yourself upright and all that good stuff. So,
damn Skippy. All
right. So we're going to start closing out the show now. So next week, this is a two-part, topic, 2-episode topic that we're talking about here. So next week is going to be part 2, or as I like to say, part deux. Because, I'm a Leslie Nielsen fan. The guy was awesome, and Hot Shots were like amazing movies. Naked Gun.
They were great movies.
Wait. See, I did the same thing you did, man. It's Hot Shots with Charlie Sheen and
Shots. Yes.
Yeah. But Naked Gun is still a very good movie series. 2.5, 3. So, okay, let's not get in the weeds here, pal. So, it happens, dude. It's all good. That's why I love you, buddy. Anyway, so like we were talking about, next week we're going to continue our conversation on PTSD, except we're going to focus more on coping strategies and means of recovery. Yeah. So it's going to kind of be the bookend to this episode that we're doing now. So it's going to be good. We're going to do a bunch of research so we know what we kind of sound like we know what we're talking about. I didn't know what I was talking about this episode. That's why I just read it straight from these article sources. So yeah. So one of the other things I want to do real quick is a shout out to my friends of the show who helped out. Brian again is going for his master's in psychology. So thank you for giving me that source material to look up. The other gentleman that I want to recognize is Dr. Gino. Dr. Gino just wrote a new book. It's called The 7 Layers of Successful Relationships. He has a website. You can go to 7layers.com. Except in where the V is in 7, actually put numeral 7. So it's SE7EN layers.com.
I'll make a banner for it so that way it's up on the video.
Yeah, good stuff. Cool.
What was that? Seven layers.
It's 7layers.com, but instead of the V, put a 7. So he has a PhD in neuroanthropology. So it's like some wicked smart stuff. Like it has to do with the brain, the brain science, and then the anthropology of how it connects with societal and cultural norms and all that kind of stuff. It's way over my head, but super smart guy, knows what he's talking about. There you go. Hey, look at that. See, folks, this is episode 8, and we're still learning how to do cool shit on this show. It's fantastic. So props to my co-host here for figuring out how to put a banner up there. It's like, yeah, nice. Pulling a John moment. But it's available on several places. I think it's available on Amazon and any other place that books are sold. It's really, really good information. I'm looking forward to reading this book myself, and I believe he's got some other books coming out in the future. But I can tell you that Dr. G is not the kind of guy. He's the kind of guy to be tenacious. He doesn't half-ass nothing. So it's going to be a good book. Read it. So again, Dr. Gino, thank you for contributing to the show. We appreciate it. Yeah. So that being said, thank you to everybody that watched tonight. Hopefully you'll be back next week when we continue our discussion on PTSD. Please feel free to, tell us what you like about our show, what you think might be a good subject matter down the road that you will maybe want to hear us talk about. We're open to suggestion. Okay. So let's talk about help.
Hell. I was going to say input, man. Give us input on how you guys felt, what things that you've gone through too. Don't be scared to put down things.
I thought you were talking about hell. Like that's kind of a ideological kind of conversation, depending on, and if you have a religious context too, like. So
definitely, drop comments on the
I just thought about that scene from whatchamacallit, Monty Python. Bam! Whack themselves on the head with the rock. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is why we are doing this show together, because we're cut from the same type of soiled loincloth. We're not right. We're a little bit off, but you know what? It just makes for some damn good entertainment. So, but all serious aside, all joking aside, excuse me. Just as a reminder, you can catch our show in a lot of different places. There's the Anchor app. There is Spotify. We have Spotify. You can catch all of our episodes previously produced and published on Spotify. There is Apple Podcasts. What are you laughing at?
No, we gotta laugh out loud.
Oh, Nicole, hey, friend of mine. So thanks for joining the show. But yeah, there's a lot of different places you can go on Google. You can check out, just put in Battle Bros Podcast. It'll come up, which is crazy. Yeah. It's like, this is something on the interwebs that I'm
I think we're still like number 2 or number 3 on the Google search list. If you look up Battle Bros Podcast, I think we're still like number 2 or number 3 on the search list.
And when we say that, folks, we're not saying it to put on a front. We're genuinely wow, this is amazing. It's amazing that this is doing so well, and we're going to maintain that level of humble, because there's a lot of shows out there where people just get so full of themselves, and the verbal diarrhea that they're spouting forward. It's just like, dude, why am I listening to you? Should click. Oh, Battle Bros Podcast. Yeah, let's check this out. That one guy's funny. This other guy's good looking. The other guy's like, he got dropped on his head. Yes. I have a 5 head. It's okay, folks. It's fine. Anyway, so yeah, but there's a lot of different
sun off that sucker.
Okay, now you're being mean, and this is why we're friends. But anyway, if you want to watch the shenanigans unfold live in front of you, we're live every Friday night at 9:00. Every Friday. You can catch up. You can catch the show after the fact on. You can check it on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel as well. And I found out last week that what do we have? We have a Patreon.
I'm still currently working on the Patreon. I'm trying to figure out how to get our audio uploaded there. What
did you say we had last week that I was done? Oh, Instagram, right?
Yeah, I've been posting on Instagram via my own page, but I'm working on trying to figure out how I can actually get my oh, no kidding. He was 25th, huh? But yeah, I've been trying to figure out how to get our audio uploaded onto the Patreon. If there's anybody that knows how to work that crap, I could use some help, because I'm like,
yes, yeah. I mean, listen, we consider ourselves intelligent guys, but at the same time, there's a reason why they print all the instructions on any piece of equipment that you got to use. Yeah, because it's like, how does this thing work? Okay, don't point at face. Ooh, already messing that up. So, yeah. But please, we're only 8 episodes in. You know, it feels it's crazy to think we've been doing this for 2 months straight now, but you know,
I know it doesn't feel that damn long, dude.
No, it doesn't, man. It's just like, wow, like we just doing this a couple weeks, 8 episodes. Holy shit! Like this is awesome. But nice. So, by all means, you know, the best way for us to get out there is, you know, from the people that are following and watching. Again, thank you so much for making this happen. We are greatly
like and share, man. Absolutely,
like and share. And just tell your friends about it, man. Word of mouth is still a viable source of advertising, and we will not turn any of that stuff away.
And it's actually still the most viable, believe it or not. No matter how much the electronic advertisers want to tell you, word of mouth is still the best way you could get us out there with it, just like with anything else. Yep. So, like we said, like what we like our show, share it with your friends, share it with friends that you know that are veterans. I mean, hell, share it with friends that you know that are not veterans. Anybody that needs a laugh, needs to be informed on certain little things, you know, it helps out a lot for them to be able to listen to this. And sometimes it actually might help someone.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's going to be plenty of times where you can just go back and hell, you can go to our first couple of shows, just listen us make fools of ourselves or tell funny stories. Like if you can laugh off of that, hey, cool. I helped make somebody's day better. So it's kind of like that pay it forward kind of thing. So it's like,
exactly.
Cool. So, all right, folks, we're going to call this a show. Awesome. So please check us next week when we continue our conversation. Thank you for everybody that was watching. If you are back again, appreciate it. If you're checking us out for the first time, hey, welcome, and we hope to see you next time. So
until next week, y'all.
Until next
week.
This is Alamo and Mac. And we're signing off, and I'm going to do something different. I'm the High Commander, and this is my Royal Salute.
Let's see if anybody gets that reference.
If you get the reference, put it in the comments. Yeah. So, all right, folks. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next week. Y'all take it easy, stay safe, and just keep a good prayer in your heart for everybody that's over in harm's way right now. Continue to keep them in your thoughts and prayers. And
roger that, baby.
Yeah. Remember, everybody deployed. So, all right. Yep. Y'all take it easy. We'll see you next week, and we love you so much.
Thank you.
All righty.